All right. Welcome, Harshil.
Thank you. Food. Yeah. It's been a long day for me. I have been attending a lot of conferences because I have been doing developer education for a while. And I know organizing a conference or just like a data DX stage is not an easy job. So let's hear it for the Prisma team for organizing and doing a wonderful job. Thank you. Uh, as I mentioned, I've been attending conferences a lot and I learn a lot of new things. I have learned a lot about data DX over the past 2 days, and I guess it's my time to share what I know about data DX. But before I jump into it, I would like to know a bit about you all. So can I get a raise of hands from the folks who are just visiting Berlin? It might be because of the conference or for other reasons. Alright, also quite a few of you are visiting Berlin. Let me tell you this, Berlin is fun only when you're visiting it. I would not recommend you to living over here. No, I'm just kidding. I love Berlin. I've been living in Berlin for 3 years, and I found that this city has its own weird charm, which makes you fall in love with it. Unfortunately, I'm not here right now to talk about Berlin. So if you want to talk about Berlin, hit me up, and I'll be happy to talk about it. So let's get down to the business. Can I get a show of hands from the folks who already knew about data DX before they, heard about data DX from this conference? Okay, so the number is pretty low. That's kind of a good sign for me. So I think I'm gonna just skip this question, or maybe not. How many of you think that you are adopting the data DX principles in your day-to-day work? All right, again the number is low. Fine, fair enough. And promise this is the last question.
Okay.
Are you using serverless architecture in your day-to-day job? Yeah, a couple of us. I hear a yes as well. That's fantastic. All right. Now, it would be unfair if I got to know you and you don't get to know me. So let me do a quick introduction. My name is Harshil Agrawal, and I work as a developer educator at Cloudflare. I'll be honest, it's been just over a month that I've joined Cloudflare, so I'm still learning a lot of new things, still learning a lot of new tools and products that we have to offer. So if you have any specific Cloudflare question, and if I'm not able to answer, I promise you I'll get the answer for you. But in my day-to-day work, I educate and empower the community around tools and technologies around data and storage. And I do this by doing a lot of experiments with different tools and technologies. And I like to call myself as a builder, even though I might hardly have 1 or 2 projects live. Most of them are just incomplete GitHub repos out there, but I still take pride in calling myself a builder. Alright, let's move on to the talk now finally. So the agenda of this talk would look something like this. We're going to talk about serverless architecture and try to understand it, what it is and the benefits of it. We're going to talk about data DX because not everyone over here knows what exactly data DX is.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk about how data DX enhances serverless architecture. More importantly, I want to refer back to Nico's talk, and I don't want you all to be this particular guy. Prisma tweeted this, I think, this week or last week, I'm not sure. I want to make sure that you don't become this person. So that's my aim for this talk. So let's start with serverless architecture and what it really means. Serverless architecture, whenever you ask someone what serverless architecture is, you might often hear this, that, hey, it has serverless in its word, but it does not really mean that there is no server. And that's true. There is server eventually out there. But the best part about serverless architecture is that you don't really have to manage those servers on your own. You don't have to worry about problems like scalability and reliability. You just have to work on shipping those new features. Let's take a look at an example to try to understand serverless architecture a bit better. One fine day, let's just say you came up with this new application idea, which obviously has to involve AI, and you believe it's going to change the world. Now, when we want to build applications, there are, in my opinion, 3 components that we want to think about. The first is the front end, because this is the way your user would interact with your application. Now there are tons of frameworks out there that you can use to build the UI, or you can simply go and use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But once that UI is ready, how do you distribute to the user? Traditionally, you would compile and build build the UI and then host it on your own servers, which again meant that you have to manage those servers. You have to think about scalability, reliability, security, and all those things.
Yeah.
And that's why we use platforms like Cloudflare Pages, Vercel, Netlify to host our front-end applications nowadays. The next is a database, because obviously you want to store some kind of information for your application. This can be the information that you get from the user, maybe username and password. A terrible example, never do that, but just to give you an example over here. There might be other relevant other relevant information you might want to store. Now again, traditionally you might spin up a database instance and host it on your own server, which would again involve this operational overhead. Or a better way to do this would be to use a serverless database and not worry about the servers. And lastly, because this is an AI application, we want some way to interact with the AI models out there. If you got money lying around, you can go and host these models on those expensive servers, or you can basically use APIs that these models have. You can also use Workers AI. Not sure how many of you have heard about it, but it allows you to interact with AI models or AI APIs and gives you a seamless developer experience. So to summarize this is what our layout would look like. We'll have an application, there will be business logic, assuming it's built on Workers. We have Workers AI to handle the AI stuff. We have different databases to handle the database again over here. Let's take a pause over here and think about it. If in today's world we are building a new application, we are kind of following this step, right? We have a front end which we host on platforms like again Cloudflare Pages, Vercel, or Netlify. We often tend to go ahead with serverless databases. So in a way, the modern way of building application is the serverless way. So the question might arise like, all right, okay, I might be using serverless architecture in my day-to-day work or in my side projects, but what are the benefits of it? There are tons and tons of benefits of serverless architecture, but I'm going to talk about just 3 of them. The first is going to be scalability, because our AI application became popular, we got loads of traffic. But if we are again, having those traditional mechanism of distributing this application, we might have to manage these servers on our own, and there might be a time where it might cause scalability issues. The next is cost efficiency. With this serverless architecture, you pay only for what you use. Now I know there have been some bad experiences for folks who have received bills in like thousands of euros or thousands and billions of euros. And I believe that there are ways to avoid that. One of them, I believe, is to make sure that you have proper security or DDoS protection for those for those applications, so that your application is protected from those malicious traffic. And the last is reduced operational overhead, because you're not managing your servers anymore. That is taken care for. You just have to now worry about shipping those new features for your users. But you don't really have to think about servers if you are not writing any code. But then you have to think about data. If you are, working with data and want to interact with databases with your application. And this is what data developer experience is kind of all about. It's making sure that you, as a developer, has a seamless experience when you are working with any kind of database.
Super.
Quoting the manifesto that Nicole mentioned earlier, DataDX is a set of principles, and they have very well defined those principles on the website. But I have my way of thinking about those principles, and I like to categorize them into 2 ways. The first is simplicity, which means how easy it is to work with that particular technology or that particular tool, and how easily you can set things up. The next is productivity. We want to make sure that we, at the end of the day, the technological choices that we make us feel productive, make us feel good about those choices, so that we don't have to worry about fixing those little bugs. Right. Now I'm going to talk about each of these in more details in the next slides. But I'm going to do that in context of Cloudflare D1. Now Cloudflare D1 is the serverless SQL database offered by Cloudflare. We have like a generous free tier. If you haven't tried it out, I would recommend you to go check it out. So let's talk about simplicity. And when we talk about simplicity, the first thing that comes to my mind is how easy it is to set up a project with this particular tool or with this particular technology. For Cloudflare D1, you can set up you can create the database via the dashboard, or you can use the Wrangler CLI to create the database. One of the things that I like about D1 is that it gives you, you can basically spin up a local SQL database similar to your production database. So you can run or test your queries on the local database before migrating that to the production database. Right. We have a database up and running, but we want to build a serverless application. We might want to use Cloudflare workers for that, and to initialize a project or a Cloudflare worker project, you can use the create Cloudflare CLI, which gives you a bunch of options on what kind of project you want to set up, and based on the configurations that you select, it spins up a project for you. So we got a database, we got a project repo set up. How do we connect this to? It's as simple as adding these 4 lines of code. It's simply adding those bindings. You specify the binding name, you specify the database name that you want to connect it with, and the database ID. You can get all this information from the dashboard, or again from the create database command. Right. So we got the application set up and running, which brings us to the next principle, is the reduced learning curve. And this is something that I personally resonate a lot with, because I like to play around with different tools and technologies. And one of the things that captivates me to these tools and technologies is the learning curve. Is it gonna take me a couple of days to use those technologies or those tools, or is it gonna be just maybe a couple of hours for that? And that becomes a deciding factor for me. Fortunately with D1, that is quite straightforward. So if you are familiar with SQL or SQL-like databases, you can simply run those SQL statements to operate those database queries. If you're not familiar with SQL, that's completely fine. You can use ORMs like the Prisma ORM and use that to query the database. And I have been told that SQL is quite easy to learn, but I have experienced that it gets quite complicated when you have like more complex logics going in. And this is where I feel ORMs make life more easy, because they abstract away the complexity out of those queries. Right. So in simplicity, we look at easy setup and we look at learning curve. But there are other things as well. Like simplicity does not mean just setting up the project, but it also means how it helps us, build an error-proof project. And one of the ways to do this is provide types. Now, if you are using Wrangler generates types during the runtime, and if you use Prisma ORM with it, you get an end-to-end type shifting for your project. And lastly is how simple it is to run data operations with those. So this was simplicity in terms of data DS.
Yes, that sounds good.
Next, let's talk about productivity. Productivity for me is all about the seamless experience, how less I have to worry about other things, and the better I could focus on shipping new features for my application. So productivity involves caching. Now again, you can do this with Cloudflare workers. You can hook it up with, I think it was called, not Accelerate, I forgot, but Prisma also provides you with data caching services. So there are other tools out there that you can use for implementing caching. There is performance optimization that you can do, and then there is reliability. So if you are following those data DX principles, you don't really have to worry about all these things. It's kind of is provided out of the box, and if not out of the box, you have to just do small configurations which don't take a lot of time.
I have it.
So when everyone talks about user experience, as a developer, I feel like we have to talk more about the developer experience, and in particularly now, data experience, the data developer experience. All right, we looked into data DX, we looked into serverless. Now let's talk about how data DX enhances the serverless architecture. Now I'm gonna talk about 3 major problems that I have observed when working with serverless architecture, and talk about how data DX can help you solve those problems. The first is the complexity in data management. Now, with serverless architecture, you have different services running together. You have different. You want to have data from different services at the same time, and that can get quite challenging. And I'll show data DX emphasizes on using tools like ORMs to abstract away those challenges and provide you with better abstraction to reduce this complexity. The other thing is schema migrations, because we don't build applications that are end-to-end foolproof. We always get new feature requests every day, and based on those requests, we might have to modify the schema. Now, schema migration becomes a crucial part of this pipeline. Wrangler again provides you a schema migration commands, which you can integrate in your CI/CD pipeline. You can also use Prisma Migrate and other tools out there for automated schema migration. The next is unified data and consistency. Because we have a serverless architecture, those different services might be talking with each other. There might be some data flow happening between those services. So we want to make sure that data flow is consistent and is seamless. One of the ways that data DX principle talks about is using API gateways. This makes it easy for unifying the data and gives you a better way of providing consistent data across your services. The next is event-driven architecture. Data DX encourages you to have an event-driven architecture for more data consistency across your databases. And the last is, of course, going to be scalability and performance. Data DX encourages obviously to use serverless databases. Now, there are obviously edge cases where you might think like, hey, serverless database does not solve this particular problem, or serverless database has this particular issue, right? But the way the industry is moving forward, serverless database, I feel like we are solving almost all those problems. And there might be soon enough a day where you might not face those problems. The next is data caching. Again, data DX talks about having data caching to make your apps more scalable and performant enough. With caching, I would also like to talk about data indexing, because that is something I feel a lot of people don't really talk about. So have proper indexing going on in your database so that your queries are more performant. So to summarize this, data DX enhances your serverless architecture by reducing the complexity in data management. It helps you unify the data and make sure that you have consistent data across the databases, and it also helps you take care of scalability and performance. All right. Let's take a pause. Let's breathe. We looked into a lot of things. So here's a quick break. Let's take a print. Right. I did one fun thing, which wanted to do it online, upon live over here, but it was not possible. So I recorded the talk. I asked ChatGPT to summarize it. Unfortunately, I ran out of credit, but I was able to do it in some other way. So I asked like, hey ChatGPT, can you summarize the talk? So here are the couple of points. Serverless architecture allows you to build performant applications without worrying a lot about server management and the cost. And data DX is all about making you more productive. serverless architecture
And that's
in combination with data DX, make sure that you have a performant application, but at the same time, you also have a good developer experience throughout the journey of building the application. And that's it from my side. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Harshil. Do we have any questions for Harshil?
I don't. Facebook say bye. They do.
Super. Well, if you do have some questions for him, you can find him right after the talk. And that's a wrap for the Data DX stage. We really enjoyed having you guys here for yesterday and today for these talks. If you want to talk to us about Data DX or Prisma, you can find us here. There's some great margaritas right over there, so enjoy the rest of the conference in the last few hours and have a nice weekend. Thank you so much.
Yeah. It's great. See? Oh, I'm good. Do you? That black is so